boundary setting, we don't always have to talk about being strict or harsh, right? I'm talking about creating clear, consistent expectations that actually create a sense of safety, connection, and cooperation in your home. Because here's the thing, boundaries aren't about control, they're about clarity. And when you set them the right way, everything shifts. So if you've been trying to set boundaries with gentle parenting and it feels like your kids are just walking all over you, or if you've been setting boundaries the way that your parents did and it feels way too harsh, I feel you. I've been there, and there is a better way. And it doesn't require yelling or punishments or exhausting power struggles. So, real quick, if you're ready for parenting tips and parenting advice that actually work, go ahead and like this video and subscribe, because this is where positive parenting meets strong boundaries. And trust me, you can have both, okay? Forgive my voice. I am sick. So, I'm under the weather today. But here's what I hear from moms all the time is I set a boundary and my kid just ignores it. So then I repeat it and I repeat it and eventually I just give in or I lose it. Or sometimes they'll say, I don't even know what my boundaries are. I just react in the moment and then feel guilty afterwards. And really, the exhausting part is that you're like stuck between feeling like you have to be a pushover or you have to be too harsh. Like there's no middle ground, right? So here's what's really happening. Boundaries aren't just about controlling your child's behavior. They're about creating that emotional safety. And this is in the environment part of my trifecta of focus, because when your home has clear, consistent boundaries and and repetition of these clear, consistent boundaries, your nervous system and your child's nervous system can relax. They know what to expect. They know the rules. They know what happens if they follow them and what happens if they don't, right? But when boundaries are unclear or inconsistent or reactive, their brain stays in this state of like stress. And they're constantly testing you to see if you really mean what you say. And the testing can show up as misbehavior, tantrums, or just challenging behavior. But it triggers the subconscious mind into feeling like they aren't safe, which also shows up as these kinds of behaviors. So before we dive into how, we need to clear up a huge misunderstanding about boundaries. Boundaries are not harsh discipline. They're not punishment. They're not you standing over your child like a drill sergeant saying, these are the rules and you better follow them or else, right? The boundaries are structure. They're safety. And they're your child knowing this is how our family works. This is what's expected. I know what happens either way. I feel safe. And here's the part that a lot of people miss is that strong boundaries actually create more connection, not less. Because when your child feels safe and knows what to expect, they can finally relax and connect with you. And this all happens subconsciously, okay? So let me teach you the system that I use that works even with my strong-willed child. In the next video, we're going to talk more about strong-willed children and a specific technique that works insanely well for them. But this is the foundation that really needs to be put into place first, okay? I call it the behavior savior system, and it's what I teach in my Mastering Boundaries course. So this is not a quick fix. It's foundational, and it requires you do some upfront work. But I promise you, mama, you're either going to spend time building this system or you're going to spend all your time in just chaos and reactive mode, okay? So it's your choice. But before you even sit down to write out your boundaries, you need to get your expectations right, okay? Because the truth is that your kids are not going to follow these boundaries perfectly the first time or the second time or even maybe the 10th time. This is a process. This is development. You're going to have to repeat yourself. You're going to have to stay consistent. And that's not because you're doing it wrong. That's just how learning works, okay? So if you're going into this thinking, I'm going to set these rules and they better follow them, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to get triggered. But if you go into this thinking, I'm planting these deep roots, I'm building a foundation, I'm going to repeat this calmly and consistently until it sticks, everything shifts. So we're going to sit down and think about where's the biggest struggles in our home? Where are you repeating yourself the most? Where do things feel chaotic. Maybe it's screen time. Maybe it's bedtime. Maybe it's meal times. Maybe it's sibling fighting. Pick one or two areas to start with. Don't try to overhaul everything at once. We're not setting ourselves up to fail, okay? This is where you write down the specific boundary, not a vague idea, but a clear, specific rule. Instead of be good at bedtime, right? You're going to put after dinner, we do pajamas, we brush teeth, we read one book, and then lights out. Instead of not too much screen time, you're going to write screen time is 30 minutes after homework is done. Clear, specific, no room for like interpretation, right? Oh my goodness, I sound horrendous. I promise I'm not. I feel way better than I did earlier this week. So, hallelujah. Okay, so a lot of times people will get stuck with this part. They think consequences mean punishment, but I'm not talking about taking away toys or giving timeouts. I'm talking about natural consequences, okay? So the natural results of their choice. So let's say the rule is clean up your toys before dinner. The natural positive consequence. Dinner happens on time and we have more time to play afterwards. You're kind of connecting the dots for them, right? When you clean up quickly, we get more playtime later. The natural negative consequence, dinner gets delayed because we're still cleaning, which means we don't have as much playtime afterwards. So you're not punishing them. You're just letting them experience a natural result. And this is so much more powerful than like arbitrary punishments because it teaches them how the real world actually works. And the game changer is that you don't just create the boundaries and announce them like a dictator. You sit down with your kids and involve them in the process. Even if they're really young, you can still involve them in the process. You can say, hey, we've been struggling with bedtime lately. What do you think would make bedtime easier? Or how long do you think screen time should be each day? And you'd be amazed that kids often come up with reasonable ideas. And when they have a say in creating the boundary, they're way more willing to follow it. Because now it doesn't feel like that control, it feels like collaboration. So, next, this part is non-negotiable. You have to write it down. You create a simple chart or a list and you go over it with your family. And in the beginning, you're going to be pulling this out at meal times is when I did it. That was the best time. You're going to review it. You're going to repeat it. And here's what's happening. You are ingraining these boundaries into your subconscious and into their subconscious. So that means that when the moment comes and they're not following the rule, you don't have to think about what to do. Oftentimes when we're so heated, like everything goes out the window. But when you have it ingrained in you, it comes out naturally. You already know what to do, and they already know what's coming. Then, and this is the hardest part, we need consistency to make this work. And consistency is hard work. But here's the thing. If you've done the upfront work that we just talked about, consistency becomes so much easier because you're not making it up in the moment. You're not just reacting and negotiating. You're not wondering what to do. You're calmly following through on what you both already agreed to. Like, hey, buddy, remember our rule about toys before dinner? It's time to clean up. Do you want to start with the blocks or the cars? And if they don't follow through, you calmly implement the consequence. No yelling, no anger, no lectures, just calm, firm follow through. So let me tell you what this looks like in my house. We have, we've previously had issues battling over screen time and still do sometimes. But every single day was a fight when it was time to turn off the tablet. So I sat down, created our boundary. I involved my boys in the process. We agreed 60 minutes of screen time after homework, after chores, with a 5-minute warning before it's time to turn it off. And I wrote this down and we went over it at dinner time, like every day for a while. We practiced it. And the first few days, it was pretty hard. They pushed back, but I stayed consistent. And I was like, remember our rule. We agreed 60 minutes. It's time to turn it off. And within a week, they finally stopped fighting because the rule was internalized. They knew the rule. It was clear. It was consistent. And they knew that I wasn't going to budge. We even used a timer technique so that the ending didn't come from me, but rather an outside source. So There still needed to be some reminders for me before the ending so that I could help them with that transition, but the timer worked really great. So why does the system work when everything else seems not to? When kids know the boundary and they know you're going to be consistent, their nervous system relaxes. They're not constantly testing you. They know that you mean what you say. And I'm telling you, this happens subconsciously. It's not something that they're thinking and they're plotting and planning, right? When they've been involved in creating the boundary and they know the natural consequences, and it's not you versus them, it's just cause and effect. They made a choice and here's the result. Natural consequences. They teach them to make good choices because of the outcome, not because they're afraid of you or because they're trying to get a reward. This is like real child emotional regulation and conscious parenting, because you're not controlling them, you're giving them the clarity and involving them in the process so they feel seen and heard and understood. And they're way more likely to cooperate. So these parenting strategies work for the strong-willed kiddo because they honor their sense of connection and autonomy, which are, as you know, if you've been following me, 2 of the 3 core needs. So we know now, boundaries are not mean, they're not harsh, they're love. When you set clear, consistent boundaries, you're telling your child, I care enough about you to create structure. I care enough to follow through. I care enough to be that steady, calm leader that you need. And that creates emotional safety and a connection. And that creates a child who feels secure enough to actually relax and be a kid. So I'm going to be real with you. Like, this takes work up front, sitting down, writing it out, involving your kids, reviewing it, staying consistent. I know that that's effort, but here's the choice. Like, you can spend a bit of time focusing on building the system out, or you can spend all your time in chaos and just repeating yourself and being triggered and yelling and dealing with power struggles. You're going to spend time either way. One path leads to calm, and one path will keep you stuck. So this week, pick one boundary you need to set up, just one. Write down the rule, the natural positive consequence, and the natural negative consequence, and then sit down with your kids and talk about it, get their input, write it down together, and start practicing consistency. And watch what shifts when your home finally has the structure it's been craving. So in the next video, we're diving into strong-willed kids, specifically why traditional discipline fails with them, and a special technique that has worked every time for my spirited little rebel. And if you've got spirited children who question everything, this one's going to be a game changer. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it, and I'll see you there.